morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all of you joining us today, this very special day, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this special webinar on integrating biodiversity and urban development, subnational action towards harmony with nature and sustainable development. This webinar is co-organized by ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, through our city's Biodiversity Center and its office in South America, and the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity to celebrate the International Day for Biological Diversity, or IDB. It is my honor to invite Ms. Astrid Schumacher, Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, to open this webinar by reflecting on today's commemoration and the importance of aligning the SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals, and the Global Biodiversity Framework targets. Thank you, Ms. Schumacher. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Kobe, and good day to all of you. It's just 9 o'clock here in Montreal, where our secretariat is located, and it's for us the greatest way to start Biodiversity Day, to work with all of you and to highlight the important roles that cities and regions and local actors play in implementing the global biodiversity framework. You know, International Biodiversity Day is about celebrating biodiversity, about everything that nature gives to us, provides for us: food, medicines, fresh water, climate regulation, you name it. But all of that is at threat, and it's under threat because we are threatening it. And that's a bit the theme of the day that we want to discuss. We want to discuss that we have tools to work against this trend, to protect nature. And these tools are, first of all, a global biodiversity framework. And of course, they are the SDGs. And we want to make sure that we can implement these two frameworks together. Now, subnational and local authorities are really important actors because they connect and build bridges, because those global commitments that I just mentioned, and then the action that has to happen at local level, and the data that have to be collected at local level, because the action needs to be very, very context specific if we want to be impactful. So we're very grateful to ICLEI for organizing this discussion, and to my panel colleagues from Cape Town and the province of Quebec. These are biodiversity leaders that joined with us today to celebrate Biodiversity Day. The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework is our action framework under the CBD, under the Convention on Biological Diversity. It has 23 time-bound targets that are supposed to be achieved by 2030. That's a tall order. And in order to achieve it, to give ourselves a chance, we need what we call in our UN jargon the whole of government and whole of society approach to support its implementation. And I want to highlight that we don't have much time. I've said it before, 2030 is very, very close. Next year, in 2026, we already reached the midpoint of the the agreed implementation timeline. So at COP17 in Yerevan, Armenia, parties will be conducting a global review of the progress on the implementation in the global biodiversity framework. Now, we in the Secretariat, we're working with partners to conduct this review. And of course, cities and local authorities play a very, very important role in that. So we will ask you that subnational governments, cities, and other local authorities liaise with the national governments that have to report to the convention to ensure that their contributions on the overall achievement are well captured in the national reports that are due by the end of February 2026. And I'm so happy to sort of know that Quebec and Cape Town, you are engaged in that, and I hope you will set the scene for others. And let me just repeat, time is of the essence, both in me coming to an end, because we have lots of things to discuss this morning, but really in terms of acting with great determination against biodiversity loss. The cost of delaying action to halt and reverse biodiversity loss and nature's decline is staggering. The longer we wait, the more expensive it will get. A decade of inaction could double the financial and ecological burden that the world sooner or later will have to address. So let me close by saying biodiversity is the foundation of all life on Earth. This is a fundamental principle. It's captured in the theme of International Day for Biological Diversity, harmony with nature and sustainable development. And that's what we need to do. We need to protect our nature for our planet to thrive and for us to thrive on this planet. So I'm so excited about our discussions today. Thanks again, ICLEI, and to my fellow panelists for organizing this. And it's a great way to start the day for us here in Montreal.
Thank you so much. And we also know that it's a very busy day for you. So we're very, very pleased that you're starting your morning bright and early, focusing on the role of cities and subnational governments. And thank you for that challenge put out to our constituency. I know our constituency of mayors and governors and the champions there, and they will take it fully on board. I can assure you. Thank you for your inspiring address, and it sets the scene beautifully for our next speakers. At the conclusion of COP 16.2 in Rome this year, Ms. Schumacher noted that delegates had demonstrated that multilateralism will endure. Our next interventions will show how this spirit is evident at local and subnational levels. We hear first from Alderman Eddie Andrews, who is the Executive Deputy Mayor for Spatial Planning and Environmental Portfolio Committee at the City of Cape Town in South Africa, and followed by Jacob Martin Malus, Assistant Deputy Minister for Biodiversity, Wildlife and Parks from Quebec Province, a leading province inspiring the world for what you are doing in Canada. Each of them will present their government's efforts and best practices in contributing to the Global Biodiversity Framework and SDGs to catalyze peace and prosperity for people and the planet, now and into the future. Let's hear from Deputy Mayor Andrews, who is representing probably the most biodiverse city in the world. Mayor Andrews, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kobe, and good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I think sustainable development in cities is a very challenging concept and is very difficult to achieve, especially in a city like Cape Town, where we have unique and highly threatened biodiversity coupled with huge imperative to development. So, despite this, the principles of sustainable development are extremely difficult, but mostly it's important, and every effort must be made to meet these objectives. So sound spatial planning, which takes key biodiversity informants into account, and a proactive protected area expansion strategy are key to ensuring that we meet our critical development needs while conserving our natural heritage and creating healthy and vibrant living spaces for our residents and also for those who love visiting Cape Town. And so as a city, we've done everything that we could and also a lot more still to do on these fronts with a fine scale biodiversity spatial plan, the BioNet, being a key informant in all the city's spatial planning products. And in addition, the city is currently busy finalizing the city policy in which the BioNet is adopted, known as the Cape Town Biodiversity Spatial Plan. Parallel to these processes, Cape Town and its conservation partners have proactively doubled the conservation estate in the last 15 years. Although it sounds very significant, it is still insufficient to meet the minimum national biodiversity targets, and of course, further effort is critically needed. And so currently in the city of Cape Town, we are at 22.8% of the city's surface area. And this comprises primarily of the Table Mountain National Park, currently 22, but soon to be 24 nature reserves in the city of Cape Town, and a variety of conservation steward agreements with the private landowners. And it's unlikely that Cape Town would ever have a conservation estate that exceeds 25%. However, if we include all the green spaces, we could well get close to the desired 30%. Important to know that we also report on the Global Biodiversity Framework targets via the Subnational Conservation Agency, Cape Nature, to the National Department of Forest, Fisheries and the Environment, who then report to the International Convention on Biological Diversity. So we also report the GBF targets as a city on the Cities with Nature platform, which is linked, of course, to ICLEI. And so a critical area for us to focus on the needs to be creating an understanding and awareness of biodiversity issues, as well as informing our residents and visitors alike of the immense value and, of course, more importantly, the value of our green infrastructure, our biodiversity assets. So we need to target various levels of messaging, which we believe will be most effectively done through a well-capacitated people and conservation program. The implementation of sound environmental best practice is the responsibility of every government body, line function, and resident, regardless of the field of expertise or of the function. We can only achieve these sustainability goals by working together. Biodiversity loss is real and it is a critical threat to the sustainability of our cities, countries, and planet. And I think many of us in the room recognize that. And it's important for conservation planning to be put at the forefront, and absolutely critical at the forefront at a very local level, as it is at this fine scale where the actual impacts of every development needs to be considered and prevented or mitigated. And the real gains in protected area expansion are achieved through proactive action. And again, it is at a local level where we can be more effective and where we can absolutely be more focused. Conservation implementation at the local level can ensure that we create these safe spaces that conserve our natural heritage and are accessible to the greatest number of people. Conservation implementation in urban space is certainly, as I mentioned earlier on, very challenging. So if we are to ensure that we conserve our biodiversity assets while creating well-used, well-loved and safe spaces for local residents and visitors alike, we need to demonstrate the tangible benefits that surrounding communities can gain from these areas. Land is scarce, and it is our challenge to show that conservation is critical and valuable land use, especially in the urban context. And I think, Kobe, for me, the most important take-home point from today's engagement is actually in the webinar invitation, where it recognizes in the changing geopolitical landscape, there's a growing realization that leadership is shifting towards local and subnational governments to bring about the transformative change needed to address biodiversity loss, resilience, and sustainable development. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mayor Andrews. And you address so many aspects that are so laudable in your city. And we know City of Cape Town is a fast-growing city. And you mentioned land is scarce, but it's incredibly impressive that you are so on top of the tools and the assessments that you can actually measure how you can integrate biodiversity and mainstream biodiversity in your urban planning and urban expansion initiatives, while also focusing on the social dimensions and the economic dimensions associated with it. Thank you very much for all those insights, and I hope to come back to some of those actions when we talk again in the panel discussion. We now turn to Jacob Martin Mullis, who is the Assistant Deputy Minister for Biodiversity, Wildlife and Parks from Quebec Province in Canada. Again, another province which is inspiring provinces and other subnational governments around the world with your actions. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kobe. Thank you to Iklei for the invitation. And I am only a few hours from Ms. Shoemaker, a few hours east in Quebec City, not so far from Montreal. So it's a starting point for me too today in this important international day. So thank you, Kobe. I would probably start by presenting Quebec's answer to the new Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework in this past October, so October 2024, the Quebec government announced its Quebec Nature Plan for 2030. So this is our official answer and our strategy and action plan towards reaching the targets. So the plan is actually accompanied with a record budget of $922 million from the Quebec government. So this is relatively historical for Quebec as an investment towards biodiversity. And we also aim at promoting access to nature for all. So also a fundamental aspect of the linkage between health and nature. So this historic commitment was taken by our Premier François Legault in Montreal during COP15. And we've worked from that point on very hard to develop a plan that would contribute to achieve the ambitions of the global targets by 2030, including the target that we often refer to for the conservation of 30% of marine and terrestrial areas. So with the nature plan, we've developed towards the nature plan, I should say, we've developed consultations with numerous partners. So the government went under intense work through many consultations throughout the province. And the plan that we prepared actually works around three main areas of action. I'll go quickly through these areas of action, and they are very similar to words that you've read and discussed through the global framework. So the first goal in the Quebec Nature Plan is to protect and restore biodiversity to ensure ecosystem resilience. So this is a fundamental, and it aims mainly to halt and reverse the loss of biodiversity. This is something that is quite largely worked towards by most local and subnational governments. The second goal is to encourage sustainable practices that foster biodiversity and enhance access to nature. So this is a little touch towards the health aspect with the access to nature. And globally, it encourages practices towards sustainable development in key strategic sectors. So we actually support very intensely the agricultural society, aquaculture here in Quebec. Forestry obviously is one great sector towards which we invest, and many different ranges of nature-dependent activities, obviously. And the third goal is to encourage all stakeholders. So this is a more social oriented goal. So we encourage them to engage into biodiversity conservation efforts and obviously make the most of their contributions. And this is a very horizontal goal because it includes measures to engage citizens, obviously indigenous communities, civil society, more globally, private sector, environmental groups, and our other organizations. So it's really the more social aspect of the plan. And I would add that we also have the Sustainable Development Strategy in Quebec that we adopted a few years ago. That's our formal response to the UN 2030 SDGs. And it aims to integrate sustainable development to areas of action, including, and I'm speaking mostly of government areas of action, so legislation, public policies, and different programs. So we try and have a systematic approach where SDGs are integrated into all our policies, and to obviously accelerate the transition towards a more prosperous, environmental friendly, and social responsible Quebec. So that's the main objective. This plan actually involves 110 ministries and agencies from the Quebec government, and it's designed to transform the environmental and climate challenges into business opportunities while safeguarding health, wealth, and well-being of Quebecers. So this strategy takes into account the accelerating global challenges associated with climate change and the biodiversity crisis. So this is really a mainstreaming approach that Quebec has developed through the years. And the impacts that affect all aspects of society. So those are the two main action plans that we have: the nature plan, the 2030 nature plan, and the SDGs strategy towards 2030. So those could be the main actions that we have ongoing right now.
Thank you so much, Deputy Minister. And I think this gives me such a sense of hope and pride that we are serving and working with this subnational and local government constituency around the world, led by examples from provinces and cities like Cape Town and Quebec, and there are many others that also learn from each other, connect with each other directly across the planet, really, to take this action forward. And thank you for your wonderful examples of your plans and your actions that inspire so many of us. I would now like to invite our three speakers to join a quick panel discussion. Ms. Schumacher, you've heard now, and I hope you're inspired like me from our local and subnational leaders. So my first question to you is, please share what steps the CBD, Convention on Biological Diversity, is taking to foster stronger integration between biodiversity, urban development, and global sustainable development frameworks, for instance, like the Pact for the Future.
Thank you for that question. It's a big question. Let me start by thanking the two other panelists for their presentations. As you said, it was really inspiring. There's so many good practices there, and working with you, Kobe, and others to make sure these are known and can be replicated, that really is an important part of our work. And in answering your question more specifically for us in the Secretariat, this is all about developing partnerships. And these are sort of, journeys that we take together as we all learn more about biodiversity and local impacts and learn more about what works. So we're partnering with a wide range of actors to develop knowledge products and technical tools, which are aimed at supporting local implementation. So there's guidance, for example, for how you can develop local biodiversity strategies and action plans. There are frameworks for biodiversity-inclusive spatial planning, so important, as mentioned by our colleague from Cape Town, frameworks for biodiversity, sector-specific approaches, like infrastructure, tourism, energy. So these are tools that are out there. So we need to get better on that. We need to be able to update them. So that is something that's a target, a challenge to ourselves. I forgot to mention earlier, we do have an action plan, which was adopted by our parties. And that action plan on subnational governments, cities, and local authorities, that we will review already also at our next COP. And I hope that gives us an opportunity to hear from cities what is it they really need from us and what is it we can develop together in terms of further instruments. So there is, of course, also other capacity building programs in which we partner with others. Is the Global Partnership on Subnational and Local Action for Biodiversity. And all of this encourages kind of multi-level governance and empowering cities to align what they do at city level with the national strategies and the global commitments. Very, very important in that is that the development of localized indicators so that municipalities can really track their contributions towards biodiversity goals and the broader sustainability targets like the SDGs and what the Pact of Nature tells us, the Pact for the Future tells us we should do. And there are platforms such as Cities with Nature and Regions with Nature that provide tools for local governments to monitor and report progress, not just under the Global Biodiversity Framework, but also, for example, in relation to the SDGs or the nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. And all of that, I think, again, is very much aligned with the thinking of the Pact for the Future, which calls for integrated action. And let me maybe say in closing there, when we talk about integrated action, that is about greater effectiveness, about having greater impact. The recognition that biodiversity loss, climate change, pollution are interlinked crises, that you cannot solve one without the other, I think is really becoming recognized global knowledge. So we need to overcome the fragmentation in our strategies for greater global and local impact. But it is not just about being more impactful. It's also, city governments, local governments, everybody is under strain. There's so many demands, so many things to do, so many strategies to implement. So it's also an issue of efficiency that if we manage to bring these challenges and strategies and answers together, and if we as the UN system also get better in supporting that, we can be more effective, but we can also use our resources in the best possible way. And I want to say that, and it was said by all speakers, cities are, and local governments are not just implementing things that, somebody else has agreed at a higher level. They really become key partners in shaping innovative solutions. And they are bridge builders, and all that opens the door to deeper cooperation between individual actors at the global level and between the cities, countries, local governments, and everybody else. So it's about more inclusive decision-making. And it's really about capitalizing on the opportunities that are there. So ensuring that biodiversity is protected and that it yields the benefits that then cities and others and local governments and regional authorities can reap for the benefit of their population, their citizens.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all those insights and the support and your deep understanding of the value of cities and regions in achieving the targets of the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework. And it's in this regard that I'd like to turn to Alderman Andrews, Deputy Mayor. How is the City of Cape Town leveraging the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework to accelerate local implementation of the SDGs at your level of government?
Thanks so much, Kobe. I again need to emphasize the importance of collaboration. I think that needs to be emphasized, particularly at a local government level. And so this particular framework has facilitated better partnerships nationally and internationally, especially with ICLEI and UNEP and other stakeholders, because we recognize the UN, the whole of society approach. They always remind us often about this, because all of us need to put shoulder to the wheel to ensure that we collaborate and learn from each other, because that really is important. And so this increased access to that sort of capacity I spoke about earlier, and the lessons that has been learned that we can learn from, helps us sort of develop next practice opportunities that has encouraged the city of Cape Town to not just be inspired by what's happening, but also to capacitate us to ensure that we, as Team Cape Town, accelerate local implementation. This most certainly, without a doubt, has been invaluable. And so the framework also has created much needed the general awareness of the targets and goals on platforms such as the Cities with Nature, which is linked to ICLEI. But I think it's important there are communities in the city of Cape Town that are still very much socially vulnerable. And it's those individuals that we really want to target and talk about the relationship with the environment and how they can play a part. And it is difficult because when their basic needs, such as food and shelter, has not yet been met, it does become a very complex conversation because environment is not the issue. But I think a very important point that I want to make as well. So all of these targets that I spoke about earlier on in my introductory remarks, what we've further done is each of the City of Cape Town's departments, they have their own SDBIB indicators. And an SDBIB is a fancy acronym for Service Delivery Business Improvement Processes. And so there's an indicator saying, what are you doing within your own department to lead by example? And then, of course, we can then monitor and evaluate that indicator every quarter when the report is sent to the portfolio committee. And I think often when I have these sort of conversations, I'm mindful that the importance of having the right culture, because if you don't have the right culture in any organization or community, every single strategy that you have will be undermined. And I think that is important, that we also ensure that the institutional culture in the public sector is conducive to achieve these outcomes. But most certainly, that's why we're sending smoke signals to the team members, the staff, as an indicator, just ensure the institutional in mind, the targets that we as a local sphere of government that we have to achieve as well. Because everyone loves a good indicator so we can measure and monitor progress.
Thank you so much. And it's so important to be able to measure what we want to manage. And thank you for emphasizing that, Alderman Andrews. I now turn to our Deputy Minister from Quebec, Martin Malus. And I would like to ask you, the whole of government and whole of society approaches are central to the GBF implementation. How is Quebec working with the national government and other stakeholders, such as the IPLCs and others, to ensure inclusive biodiversity planning and implementation and alignment with other agendas we've spoken about so much today?
Thank you, Kobe. Actually, this UN jargon, whole of government and whole of society approach is fundamental, and actually the nature plan, the Quebec Nature Plan, fundamentally embodies these approaches of the GBF. The nature plan was built with the society. So the Premier Legault announced the intention of Quebec to build this nature plan at COP15 at the opening session. But then we went through 12, actually closer to 18 months of consultation work with civil society. So it's actually the result of a vast consultation. And I briefly touched a few sectors that we've worked with. So agriculture, forestry, municipal was a big part of the consultation. So obviously local communities, cities were a core center approach to the consultation. We went towards research, financial, economical sectors, but we also went to sectors such as leisure, even sports, to really have a global approach and touch general public. So there were two phases to the consultation towards the nature plan. The first 8 months was really a global civil society consultation throughout all regions of the province of Quebec, north, south, east, west. So we had people throughout the province meeting with all of civil society for this period. There were also 4 phases of consultations that were specific to Indigenous communities and more or IPLC organizations in Quebec. And this was over a 14-month period. So it was for us obvious that we couldn't develop a nature plan without having Indigenous communities in the center of this approach. It was for us extremely obvious at the starting point. So we had to take into account their recommendations throughout every step of the plan's elaboration. And in the nature plan budget, I mentioned it a bit earlier, which is close to actually, it now actually has passed $1 billion. I said 922 million in my opening remarks, but we just signed an agreement with the federal government here in Canada to have an additional contribution from the federal government of $100 million. So we've just passed the $1 billion mark for the global budget. And we reserved immediately some funds, part of this amount, roughly $60 million, that are reserved to support Indigenous leadership. This doesn't make the other budgets unavailable to Indigenous communities. So that's an important point. But there's a first block of $60 million that's really reserved to support their leadership. So very recently, actually in April, the First Nations of Quebec and Labrador Sustainable Development Institute announced the launch of a $15 million Indigenous Leadership Fund for Biodiversity Conservation. This was obviously made possible and actually developed jointly with the government of Quebec. So this first announcement aims to support First Nations and communities in the southern part of Quebec to developing and implementing biodiversity conservation projects. And these has to be obviously according to their own priorities, their own recommendations, and have to contribute to reaching the 2030 nature plan's targets. We also signed an agreement with the Cree Nation government in March. This is a $6 million agreement, which is similar to support the leadership. And we're in discussion with other Indigenous communities, such as the Inuit and others, to have other agreements in further time. So this is really an approach that we've had centered throughout the consultation. And we also introduced in our legislation a new conservation tool that is specifically customized for Indigenous communities. It's the Indigenous-led protected area. So this is a new status that we have in our legislation that allows for communities to propose and adopt with Quebec conservation approaches of elements of biodiversity, but also is associated to cultural values, which is centered to Indigenous conservation approaches. So you see, we've gone through different levels of government, local with Indigenous communities, municipalities, but also agreements with the federal government. So this is really how we present the global approach in Quebec. So there, Kobe.
Taking hands and raising the ambition, and wow, what an inspiration. And I do hope that all the provincial governments across Canada and actually much further afield keep an eye on this very bold approach. And congratulations to you, and also for the very thoroughness in which you're involving First Nations and Indigenous communities from the outset. And thank you so much for those remarks. They're really inspiring. I think we have an opportunity for a very quick round of second questions, and please be brief in your responses because we do have a very important announcement at the end of this hour. But let's go back to Ms. Schumacher. Astrid, what are the CBD's expectations for subnational governments and cities in implementing the GBF and the NBSAPs, the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plans, and how can these be reflected in global review of collective progress in implementing the GBF?
Right, so because subnational governments, including cities and regions, play such an important role, as we've also just heard, we have also great expectations. And I would say they're fourfold. They're about alignment, mainstreaming, engagement, and participation. Let me unpack that very quickly. Align the local planning and with national biodiversity strategies and, of course, the global goals. Mainstream biodiversity across all sectors and engage communities and stakeholders in inclusive governance process. And we've just heard how that can be done from the two other panelists. And then importantly, participate in the national reporting processes. I've mentioned it before, as we go towards COP17 and the global review of implementation. So share data indicators and produce voluntary subnational reviews. And as we just heard, everybody loves a good indicator. So let's develop those, let's measure those indicators. And lastly, let me say this is also welcomed by parties. It's not just the Secretariat that says it's important. Our parties have acknowledged the roles of other actors other than national governments, and they have adopted a decision that allows for subnational governments and local authorities to submit commitments in support of the global goals and targets. And we're now discussing with ICLEI, UCOBE, and others to see how we can strengthen those synergies with the existing action platform to ensure that we're able to capture all this good work that's going on, and that we can share the great examples of positive action that we've heard here and the others that are around. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. And here we already now know what you want us to focus on when we go to COP17. Thank you very much for those very, very leading and very strong words of encouragement and action. It guides us as a constituency very clearly. Let's go to Alderman Andrews. Cape Town has been recognized as a champion for biodiversity management for many years. Please share maybe just one practical example of how your city aligns its urban development strategies with the vision of living in harmony with nature. Just very briefly.
Kirby, it's through our biodiversity network, our BioNet plan, and the integration of this network into the city's spatial development framework, because nothing can be approved without applying to the city through our development management department, who will then apply their mind and saying yay or nay. And I think the BioNet is a scientifically developed planning tool that identifies those critically biodiversity areas across the city, from wetlands and rivers to endangered vegetation types. So these areas are not just conserved in isolation, they're actually incorporated into the urban planning decisions. And for instance, when new housing or infrastructure developments are proposed, the city requires environmental assessments to ensure that the biodiversity priority areas are protected or offset, and that the ecological corridors are maintained. And one very recent and concrete example would be the management of the False Bay Nature Reserve, a Ramsar-accredited wetland system that lies within a dense urban environment. And so here the city has successfully balanced conservation with recreational areas, community involvement, and education. And that's the best example that I can offer you, but a very, 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 very important one.
Thank you so much, Alderman. And it's no secret that Cape Town is also my home city, so I'm very aware of the inspirational work that you're referring to in the False Bay region of our city. And thank you so much for taking care of our environment. Our city is beautiful. It's so wonderful to bring guests here. We have a Korean delegation visiting you at the moment, and they are absolutely in awe of what you're doing at the local level. So please continue with that leadership, and we stand there right next to you to support you in any way that we can. To close this round, Mr. Martin Mellers, please tell us about Quebec's commitment to monitoring and reporting on biodiversity, and what mechanisms are in place to measure your contributions to the GBF.
Thank you, Kobe. I'll be quick. As you may know, the government of Quebec is one of the founding members of Regions with Nature, which has actually been recognized as by the convention as the official online platform for reporting and monitoring the progress of subnational governments, thus contributing to the implementation of the GBF. So the Quebec government is working with and has actually provided a grant to Regions with Nature in order to develop the online platform, which is fundamental to all this approach for subnational governments. And it's also fundamental so they can share their commitments to biodiversity, but also report on their actions and achievements. I think this is the key in a way that is coherent with the monitoring framework of the GBF. So this online tool is a great way to showcase and demonstrate the vast array of actions put forward by subnationals, and in a way that contribute directly to the 23 targets of the GBF. So we actually hope that all this will encourage more subnational governments and regions to follow into in the footsteps and join the first members of Regions with Nature. Also, in Quebec, we're actually developing an annual reporting system specifically designed to monitor progress on each action identified as part of our nature plan inside the 24-28 action plan that we have adopted. So we are working with our experts, consulting researchers, Indigenous representatives to have a series of high-level biodiversity indicators to report on progress and trends towards the, actually we have 14 targets in our nature plan. We've adopted a specific framework for Quebec. So all this work is done to agree on metrics that are based on readily available data that we already have in Quebec, but also remaining coherent with the monitoring framework of the GBF. And specifically with the tool drafted by Regions with Nature. So this is a demonstration of what we've been doing at multiple levels, from the planning stage on to facilitate participation and engagement from a wide range of partners. And although it's more time is requested, so we actually may have gone faster alone. We definitely are going farther, and we're achieving a lot more together. Kobe, that's the final line.
And that is fantastic. And I want to, on behalf of Regions with Nature, really also thank you for investing in these global platforms, Regions with Nature, Cities with Nature. We need them. They are recognized by the UNCBD as the reporting platforms, and they're not easy to find funding for. And it's wonderful that provinces and champions like Quebec are actually investing and understanding why these mechanisms are so important, so that we can measure what our impact and our contribution as a constituency is to the global biodiversity framework and its aspirations. To conclude, I would like to give each speaker just a sentence or two to say, to respond to the following questions. I'm going to start in the order of Ms. Schumacher, then followed directly by Alderman Andrews, and then by Deputy Minister yourself. With the urgent timeline of 2030 for both the GBF and the SDGs, what are the most immediate and impactful actions cities and subnational governments, regions, provinces can take now to achieve these global targets? Let's start with Ms. Schumacher and then go around, as we said, Alderman to you and then to Deputy Minister.
Okay, then let's squeeze 4 actions into 2 long sentences, and they amplify what has been said before. So first of all, the very important thing is integrating biodiversity and nature-based solutions into urban planning and infrastructure development. And in doing so, of course, mainstreaming biodiversity across key sectors, like water, transport, waste, and procurement. All this has to be done with nature's needs in mind, and not treating nature as a siloed issue, but as the foundation of sustainable urban systems. And then aligning these local strategies with national biodiversity plans. That is essential, so that within a country, people don't work against each other, but in synergy, supporting each other, lifting each other up. And for that, then we also need transparent monitoring, reporting, and the development of these voluntary subnational reviews, so important. And lastly, but now I claim a 3rd sentence, but it is so important, I want to say it again, the inclusive participatory governance that has been mentioned by the 2 panelists and my fellow panelists as well. Indigenous peoples, women, and youth, all of them have to take part in action. In particular, in context, as Alderman Andrews has been describing, where there are great social challenges. We have to develop our biodiversity and nature protection plans in an inclusive manner, with bringing everybody on board that has a role to play, so that we can also design our biodiversity plans in a sort of socially cognizant way, and making sure that equity challenges are being addressed at the same time.
Thank you very, very much. And let's go directly to Alderman Andrews.
Kobe, thank you. I absolutely agree with what Astrid just mentioned. I can't disagree. I need to agree with that. But I think I want to make this remark. If you are, the question is, what must we do now? I think for cities to recognize that they have to fight, they have to advocate for a seat at the table. You have a very important role to fulfill. All the levers to achieve those outcomes are within the ambits of local government. I agree there must be healthy relationships with respective spheres of government, but for local government to first of all understand the important role that they have and what they need to do to ensure that they have a seat at the table, and not to lose sight of the organizational culture. I think there's a comment that former UN Secretary Ban Ki-moon mentioned at a conference, IUCN conference a while back, and it sort of, when I think about it, it really challenges me as a practical principle just to look over the fence in terms of what are we doing? Are we on track? And if not, what we need to do? Because he said the following: we have a moment in time, but we don't have time.
Wow, very, very wise words. And let's hear from Deputy Minister from Quebec.
I'll be quick, Kobe. I have similar elements that I wanted to reach towards, as Ms. Shoemaker mentioned. First of all, we fundamentally work in a global and inclusive approach and have the whole of society together to determine the targets that and specifically the way of implementing these on throughout the territory. So this is one of the fundamental aspects. Secondly, we've worked very hard on the monitoring, and this is going to be fundamental to report towards society so that people can actually appreciate the way all of local and subnational governments have worked towards the global framework, and I think this is going to be fundamental, that there's a certain harmony in the approach and the actually indicators that are used. And the two last aspects are, first of all, I think the role of good leaders can make a big difference in pushing forward, and I think there's an opportunity. This is my last point, with these national contexts in which we're going through right now, and at all levels, UN, national, local levels. There's a lot of complexity at this moment. I do believe that it's more than an opportunity. It's actually the role of local and subnational governments to occupy the space that is created right now by this context, and pick up to compensate for this space that is created by the global context. So I think we have. It's more than an opportunity. It's really our role to be doing this right now, Kobe.
Thank you for that optimistic way of describing to us the geopolitical context which we all live in and which will always be there, and seeing the opportunity in that, Assistant Deputy Minister. And really, I'm so encouraged by the leadership and the bold actions taken at subnational and local level of government. This is really where the action happens and where decisions are made by people like you around the world, in cities and regions around the world, daily, which shape our lives and how we engage with nature. Today is a day of celebration, so I'm going to ask you to practice your biggest, broadest smile for this very happy day when we celebrate nature, and we are part of nature indeed. But just before we do, as part of this webinar and celebration, ICLEI and the CBD and all our partners partners. And here I want to say thank you to all our partners who we work with. I have a very special announcement to make. To share this exciting news, I invite now Mayor Alfredo Coro, who is the mayor of Del Carmen in the Philippines and is also ICLEI's portfolio lead for biodiversity, water and health, to take the floor. Mayor Coro, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for your fantastic announcement that's coming our way.
Naradyaw na adlaw sa tanan. First, congratulations to our very, very wonderful panel. A happy International Day for Biodiversity. The theme, Harmony with Nature and Sustainable Development, offers a timely reminder of the essential role cities and subnational governments play in protecting and restoring biodiversity. Healthy urban ecosystems are the bedrock of resilient, livable, and sustainable communities, supporting clean air and water, food security, and cultural vitality. This year's theme highlights the interlinkages between the 2030 Agenda and its Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and the goals and the targets of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, or the KMGBF, two global agendas that must be pursued hand in hand, echoing the spirit of the newly adopted Pact for the Future. Yet, as my colleague Kobe Brand, Global Director of ICLEI Cities Biodiversity Center and Deputy Secretary General of ICLEI, reminds us, peace, prosperity, and planetary health will remain out of reach unless we take bold and coordinated action to safeguard biodiversity and reconnect communities with nature. Fortunately, the solutions are at hand, and the momentum is building across all levels of government. Through multi-level governance, shared knowledge, and decisive local action, we're shaping cities that thrive in balance with the natural world. Today, in recognition of this progress, we'll proudly be announcing the event report from the 8th Summit for Subnational Government and Cities, co-hosted by ICLEI, the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Biodiversity, and Regions 4, in partnership with the Government of Colombia and the City of Cali, as an official parallel event to CBD COP16 held in Cali, Colombia late last year. The report captures the bold commitments and inspiring actions of local and regional leaders who are spearheading transformative change for biodiversity and their communities. Biodiversity COP 16.2 itself brought noteworthy gains for cities and regions, reaffirming their vital role in implementing the KMGBF, with key outcomes including access to new biodiversity financing resources, recognition in national reporting systems, and inclusion in monitoring frameworks. The adoption of the resource mobilization decision opens avenues for cities to leverage private finance, green bonds, and biodiversity credits. The decision on planning, monitoring, reporting, and review provided renewed impetus for cities and regions to report and track progress via Cities with Nature and Regions with Nature, recognized in CBD Decision 1512, as the online platform where local and subnational governments should report against their commitments to contributing to the KMGBF and the National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plans, ensuring local efforts are reflected in national and global targets. The 8th Summit showcased the power of collaboration through its core themes of partnering, progress, and peace. It demonstrated how cities and regions, through self-organized networks, are leading the way in financing and implementing and reporting on biodiversity efforts. The report we launched today illustrates how subnational governments and partners to translate global biodiversity commitments into meaningful local action, ensuring that harmony with nature becomes not just a vision, but a lived daily reality. Looking ahead, we turn our attention to several key global milestones that will further advance this agenda. The 2025 UN Oceans Conference in Nice, France, this June 9 to 13, co-hosted by France and Costa Rica, will be a key moment to accelerate ocean action under the theme Accelerating Action and Mobilizing All Actors to Conserve and Sustainably Use the Ocean. I'm honored to join a panel at the Ocean Rise and Resilience Summit on June 7, a special event focused on subnational governments, where I'll highlight how cities can lead on ocean conservation through coastal resilience and biodiversity restoration. Ramsar COP15 Convention on Wetlands taking place in Victoria Falls, Zimbabwe from the 23rd to the 31st of July will focus on wetland conservation, freshwater protection, and the role of local governments. This includes the announcement of the new Wetland City accreditation recipients. ICLEI is working closely with the Ramsar Secretariat to actively engage cities in strengthening their role in public awareness and decision-making on urban wetlands conservation and restoration, and in promoting their contributions in the resolution and enhancing the convention's visibility and synergies with other multilateral environmental agreements, including the 3 Rio Conventions. At the World Water Week in Stockholm, in August 24 to 28, ICLEI, IUCN, and Veolia will co-host a session titled Rising Tides, Thriving Cities, Water, Equity, Biodiversity, and Climate Resilience. This session will position cities as critical catalysts for transformative change, demonstrating how integrated approaches can deliver real impact across multiple sustainability challenges. Finally, UNFCCC COP30 in Belém, Brazil, from the 10th to the 21st of November, will mark a pivotal moment in multilateral climate diplomacy. Under the principles of cooperation among peoples and respect for science, Brazil's leadership aims to unify the climate, biodiversity, desertification, and sustainable development agendas. COP30 will serve to protect and strengthen the institutional legacy of the Rio Conventions, bring negotiations closer to the realities of the people's lives, and accelerate the implementation of the Paris Agreement through structural solutions that extend beyond the climate regime, advancing reforms in global governance and financial systems. As we mark the International Biodiversity Day and look forward to building further momentum at CBD COP17 in Yerevan, Armenia in 2026, let us reaffirm our collective commitment to building a nature-positive future where cities, nature, and people flourish together. May you all live long enough to see our impact. Salamat gayud Karajaw. A pleasant day to everyone. And again, a happy International Day for Biodiversity.
Thank you so much, Mayakoro, for those inspirational words and also for telling us how busy our year is going to be. I'm looking forward to seeing you in France in just a week's time. And thank you very much also for your commitment to the cause, all the way from the Philippines. So we've heard from people across the globe, really, just a snapshot. But I want to pay tribute to the many, many cities and regions we work with around the world who are making this movement of local action possible and who are inspiring us every day to do what we do here at ICLEI, but also in partnership to our many, many partners. And this is also a hats off and a thank you to all our partners that we work with. Regions 4 was mentioned, but there are many, many other city networks, UNEP, so many other partners that we take hands with. IUCN was mentioned, many more, and it would not be possible to do what we do to keep on telling the story of why local and subnational government action is so important and how it can accelerate to change our world for a better world. It's been a fascinating discussion. On this commemorative day, let's remember that the path to harmony with nature requires true collective action across governments, cities, and communities worldwide. Thank you again to our wonderful panelists and to all of you for your participation. Let us all do more and do it now to create cities and regions that actively contribute to the global agenda so all people can live in harmony with nature as we should. And with this, I would like our panelists to please just put on that broad smile. Let's celebrate this day with nature, with Miss Astrid Shoemaker, the First Lady of Nature in the world. We're very honored to be with you, and we wish you a fantastic rest of your day when you celebrate in many other forums. So thank you very much for your participation, to all the panelists and everybody that joined in. This broadcast will be made available and shared widely through our channels into the future so that many others can also see and hear your inspiring words. Thank you.